is Louise Fletcher with This Painting Life, and today I'm talking to Karen Stamper, a UK-based artist whose work I've admired for a long time, so I'm really, really happy to have her with us. So hi Karen.
Hi, thank you for doing this, it's great.
So Karen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
Okay, I work in paper collage and paint. I used to work purely in paper collage. I spent many years traveling and working overseas, and along the way I collected lots of different papers. And I used to do Mediterranean scenes with houses, buildings, palm trees, shutters, with lots of layers of collage. And I used to sell those a lot with open studios. But in the last 4 or 5 years, I've moved much more into painting, but I try and mix the two together. So I start with paper collage and then paint and paper and paint.
So what made you switch from collage and what made you interested in paint?
I think the collage was becoming very easy, and I was selling well, and it just wasn't satisfying me anymore. And I went to work with Emily Ball, who's a painter in the south of England, and she's books out, and she, a bit like Nicholas Wilton, she shares so much. So she's a working painter, but she also teaches workshops, and she just pushes and pushes you on a workshop to really think about paint and mark making. And the first few times I came back with, as my partner would say, these big blobby things, these big blobby paintings. And then, of course, you had to bring it back and make it into your work. You know? So it slowly evolved with the collage and the painting together with acrylic. And, you know, I'm still balancing the two and finding out which direction to go, really.
How would you say using paint has changed what you do?
With collage, you're always working in shapes, and I used to paint my tissue papers and my papers flat colour, so you're always working with flatness. And I did, in the beginning, you know, I did a lot of silk screen when I was at college, and I love that flat, opaque colour.
Right.
So when I worked with the collage papers, that's what I was using, and the flat newspapers and labels and things like this. So they're very definite shapes. And then it was almost an eye-opener when you start to work with paint, because of course you can make beautiful marks and lines and scratches and all those things that I was missing out on with the paper collage.
And
so
how had you got into collage? You know, in the first place, was that just an instinctive thing, or?
I did start working in collage when I was at art college in Bradford, by the way.
Right.
And then I went off traveling for about 10 years with my sketchbook. But of course, I was only carrying a couple of pens and pencils, but I was always collecting. It was those scrappy bits of paper on the street and on billboards that I was collecting along the way, that, you know, the surfaces themselves, what I could take home. So I'd come home for a couple of months in the winter time and start working with these papers based on my travel memories.
Right.
And drag my folder off around London to the magazines, editorial magazines. And then come January, March, I'd be off again, because the lure of the big blue sky was more than staying in the UK. So I was torn. I mean, I spent say 10 years and more traveling and loving the jobs I was doing, but still keeping my sketching, my drawing, my collage work going as well. But not as serious as I am now. You know, obviously.
Right. Now, do you work full time now?
Yes, I work full time as an artist. I would say I've been working full time as an artist for about the last 20 years, but I've also been teaching full time.
Right.
A lot of that time. The last 8 years or so, I got down to 2 days a week at school.
That's great. Yeah.
Teaching, secondary kids, which I've loved. And when you're in your studio all day, you do, you know, my quiet time used to be when I went into school, just to be with the kids for an hour, teaching them. You know, you're not thinking about your social media and your galleries, and you know, and I did love working with the kids, but I've just packed it in this July. I've stopped teaching at school.
Right, so it's full time in the studio now.
Yeah, but like so, I count myself as full time, because every minute I wasn't in school, I was in the studio and putting probably more hours than some people do who aren't working.
Right.
That give a job to a busy person.
Yeah. That's the same for me, because I work full time, and then it's like nighttime is either painting time or social media time or blog time or so you mentioned sketchbooks, and I know that's a huge part of your work. First of all, how do you use them in terms of developing pieces, or are they completely separate things?
I go out sketching to work in my sketchbook, and it is a different thing to what I do on the canvas, but I'm trying to bring the two together much more. My sketchbooks, when I was traveling, let's say it was lots of line drawing and a little bit of collage, but over the last few years, now I start with collage in the sketchbooks and prepare the surfaces before you go out sketching with, wherever you're going, with some materials from, say you're going to Paris, with some French. So you've got a little bit of lettering coming through, a little bit of layers from that place. But my sketchbooks, I rarely have them open when I'm working in the studio. It's in my head. No, actually, more and more I have them open, but I didn't used to. Once you sketch, that was done. And then when I was in the sketchbook, I've got my papers out, and it's the memory and the marks, and it's a different thing, but it obviously comes from the sketchbook. But I'm not religiously copying what I did in my sketchbook.
Yeah, so they're like artifacts all by themselves.
Yeah, well, they're becoming like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and do you ever show them?
Do I show them? Yeah, every time when I do an art fair or open studios, I always have my sketchbooks out, which people love because they love looking through a sketchbook. Now people say, do you sell them? But you can't sell your sketchbooks.
No. Oh, no.
No.
And yours would be worth so much because you're doing so much work in them that you'd have, whole pieces in there.
Yeah, and with these lovely concertina books, you can open a double page and you've got a piece of artwork there that is so simple, which that's what I want to get the simplification across in the paintings. But of course, when you start working on a bigger piece, you fill it with all these things, and really that's one of my battles at the moment, is to create some space like you have in the sketchbook.
Right. I know with the sketchbooks, you're running sketchbook courses now, because there's a couple of people I know who've taken the course in person, and then now you're doing it online as well, aren't you? So tell us about those courses and what are you, because I'm terrible with the sketchbook, honestly. I have phases where I'll do a lot of drawing, but that drawing has nothing to do with my paintings. It's sketching my cat or whatever, my house. And then I have paintings, and I'd love to be able to use a sketchbook more effectively than I do, and to create nice things in there. So what do you teach in your workshops, both online and in person?
Okay. The Sketchbook Workshop, the online course, is the one-day workshop split into 6 lessons, basically. Right. And I found over the years from teaching workshops that people often say, oh, I've got a sketchbook like you on my shelf. I've never opened it, or there's something on one page, something on the next. And I think it was with the concertina sketchbooks, how you could start to tell a story. You can see my hands are going here. And how you can go from page to page to page, instead of it just being something in the middle of a page. So on these workshops, first of all, I get people to break up the pages with some different materials and techniques, not even thinking about what it's going to be. And I think this is the bit that really frees people up, because then they've got some marks to respond to. Vaguely we know it's a theme, if it's going to be buildings or gardens or people. And then once they've made marks across maybe 6 or 7 pages, we then start to add a little bit of detail. And it can then be as much from observation as people want, or complete from imagination. And then it starts to become their style. But I've kick-started them with all these different marks, which get people so excited. If you see on my the Facebook page that we've set up for the online course, I thought it would just be people, step by step showing me what they're doing. But they're just putting up these stunning pages of beautiful sketches that are so full of life and layers and quirky angles. They're beautiful. So,
I saw somebody I know had put on, I think at the beginning, this must be the beginning stage where you get them to prepare the page with whatever. And the piece that she put up was like a beautiful artwork. I was like, don't do anything else. It's just lovely the way it is.
And that's what I want to get in my paintings, that, you know, 3-4 marks that look stunning, but with much more work in there, much more going on underneath the underneath marks.
Now, when you start painting with collage, I'm really interested in that, and I'll put a link to Karen's online course for anybody who's interested.
Thank you.
Post this. But when you start with collage, and this is something I've been really interested in collage over the years, and have done made various pieces, and actually the collage pieces are usually the ones that always sold easily, interestingly, and I really love doing it. Now that I'm working more in layers, I'm struggling with the collage, and so I'm asking for some free technical advice here, but I bet I know other people have this same struggle, that if you begin with collage, often then you come in and you scratch back through the paint and you rip all this paper or it just starts to look really messy. Or I paint over some of my collage bits and it's all bumpy and it doesn't look right because nobody knows that was a piece of map under there. It's like a bump now. And how do you handle that when you're beginning with collage and then going over? Are you sealing the collage in somehow?
Yeah, I do now. I didn't used to when I didn't paint so much. And they were under glass, but now I'm doing them on canvas or board. So I would collage to start with, and often with wallpapers with a bit of surface on there, really flat. And then I probably put some gesso over the top or white acrylic, so you're knocking it back again. So you've got this white surface, but now you've got a bit of texture on there. And then start collaging with layers of see, I use tissue paper a lot, and I don't mind the wrinkles and bumps. They're part of it.
Right.
Whereas if I was collaging with, say, a magazine page or something, you know, just normal paper, it would start to bubble and bump. I would either scratch it, make it part of it, distress it more. Yes, but seal it with layers of acrylic medium, so it's, you know, it's sealed in. But I did read on one of Nicholas's posts about somebody, and they said they always spray the paper before they stick it down. So like, I've lost you a bit there. Yeah. So like wallpaper, it will, as it dries, it will, well, like when you're stretching paper for a watercolor, it will shrink and dry flat. So I've just started, you should try that. If you want it to dry flat with the bumps. And then you lose it if you've painted over it. Well, then again, it's back to Nicholas. Just don't care. It's there underneath. You can re-excavate.
Yeah.
But actually sealing it makes it so strong. When I just tried sanding something back yesterday with the collage papers that I'd sealed with acrylic medium, and I couldn't, you know, take the surface off because it set so hard.
Now, so when you, I don't know, I'm sure you know the artist, I think his name's Mike Bernard, and he begins, I have a book of his, and he begins with collage as kind of a composition. So he gets his composition with collage pieces, but he starts with an intention and he knows what scene he's going to be painting. Even though he's quite loose and somewhat abstract, and then he paints over those, and then he might collage in again and paint. And I just found that process so fascinating, because when he put his collage pieces down, it showed it in the book, and I'll try and find a link for everybody to put this in on the YouTube. But I couldn't really see the composition that he could see from those pieces, but obviously he could see it. So how do you begin to build up a painting? Are you beginning that way with an intention and a composition, or does that emerge over time?
It emerges as the collage starts talking to you. I mean, this piece behind me is quite abstract, but to me it's obviously shippy and it's going through water and it's heavy and strong, but you know, not everybody can see that. But I know this started with some grey stripes you can see, and that's wallpaper. So stuck that on, not thinking too much about it. Then that big greeny blob was a big sheet of tissue paper that I'd painted. And I just moving it around until I find a place. And sometimes you just got to stick it down and know that you can paint over it if it's not in the right place. You know?
Right.
And then up at the top there, I ripped up an old painting, and then it started to talk to me. When I placed that up the top, that seemed to be like the top of the ship, and then the image started to develop. So then you're much more conscious about where you're laying things and if there's a horizon line,
Right.
So it's only after some of those papers have started talking back, but I don't think it's as strict as Mike does it. I think he knows his harvesting quite well before he starts, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah, and he seems to have a decision about what it is he's interested in that scene, and what's going to be the focus and all of that.
Yeah. See, I'm trying to move away from that, much more abstracted, but with clues, so you can access. There's a way in, rather than being completely abstract. But then some people might say, I really can't see a ship in there.
I know. I'll do an abstract landscape, and I think it's so obvious. And there's a guy who frames my paintings, and he was looking at some of the ones in progress, and he said something about a sky, and I said, well, like that sky, and he went, oh, is that a sky? And then he was looking at it like really, oh right, that's a sky. And I said, that's obviously a sky, but it's not obvious to other people.
That's what we do. Sometimes you need to give a bit more of a clue.
Yeah.
But sky's a sky, isn't it? It's there.
I thought it was a sky. I thought it was obvious. So what is it that makes you, it's making you have that feeling that you want to move more away from what you were doing before? Is it is it this idea of constantly progressing, or is there something about your work that is dissatisfying you in some way and making you want to move towards something else?
Yeah, it's the joy of paint. I realise now why painting is a lifetime. I'm a beginner. I'm making marks, and it's that challenge. It's the being in the studio painting that matters, not the sales. You know yourself, when you've done a painting, you've churned it out, it's then on the wall, you've moved on. You're back in the studio working on the next one, because that's what feeds us. And if you could only be happy with what you've done and say, right, this is who I am, I'm going to do more of these. But I'm forever going back to find more. And I think it's the balance, the design and the value and the edges and the composition and that constant juggling until it can, says something to you, when you just get it right. That's what motivates you. That's what makes you go back to the studio. If you go into the studio every day thinking, I've got to do something to sell, I'm kind of sinking at the thought of that already. Yeah,
it'd be like a job, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so we just need to do it.
Yeah, someone asked me recently, do you get upset when you sell a painting and when it goes away? Yeah. And apart from a couple that have really personal feelings for me that I wouldn't put up for sale, and by the time, like you say, by the time they're in frames and ready to go up for sale, it's not that I don't like them, it's just like, okay, I'm on to something else now. And I think it must be like that for actors when you see them doing interviews about a film that they made a year before and they're talking about it again, but they're already working on something else.
Yeah, they can't remember.
Yeah, but I think just as you're saying, it's that exploration. If people can get to that point where they're enjoying the process, that's really all there is, because the happiness that comes from selling a painting is short-lived, like the happiness that comes from anything, really. I mean, the actual surge of happiness that, yes, somebody liked my painting, they gave me some money, that's great.
Buy another canvas.
I mean, it's great, but then it's gone the next day or 2 days later. But the joy that you find when you get what you're describing, that feeling, that you can always go back to. And I think that's the thing. One of the things I've noticed, I'm helping a small group of artists at the moment, trying to learn how to paint intuitively. And you talked about that at the beginning. And one of the things that I've noticed is how, like you're working on the sketchbooks, it seems to be very hard for some people to get to that point because they are at the point where they're thinking of a sale or a picture or a finished thing. And I'm wondering, perhaps the sketchbooks makes that easier because you think, right, I'm in a sketchbook here. It's not
it's not precious.
But I know you've done a lot of teaching. So how do you get how do you help people to let go and just really enjoy themselves painting, and therefore find out what they love and who they are through painting?
Yeah, I think with the Sketchbook Workshop, it's in that first 10-15 minutes when I get them to do 4 or 5 different techniques, you know, and it involves gesso and ink, and it really is just playing. You know, again, go and play with materials, and don't be thinking, oh, it's got to be a house, it's got to be a person, because that just freezes people up, especially when they're new. You know, in my workshops, often people are, you know, they've had a book, do a little bit of painting, you know, and they're afraid to just play and let the materials do what they do. So that's, I think, we've in the first, like, say, 10-15 minutes when they've done that, and then we start to add a little bit of drawing, but nothing complicated, so they feel comfortable as well and not under pressure that they're going to have to draw something.
Yeah.
It takes time. And some people get it straight away, and you can see, I mean, some people often come 2-3 times to a workshop, and by the time they've done it, you know, the second or third time, they think, oh yeah, I know what you mean now, and they feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then they can move forwards. But it's hard. It's like, you know, trying to be, you know, wanting to be abstract. It's hard to let go of that little bit of representation.
Why is it so hard? I struggle with that all the time. Even if I move into my iPad, and I just am playing there, it's like, why can't I just make a giant mark across this now? It's digital. I can get rid of it if I don't like it. But it's, you know, it's a landscape, so it's got to be landscapey.
And you have that, you know, I go to the studio with the intention of putting a great big mark across there, but then you find your tools aren't big enough. You know, often I use the side of my arm, think, what if I smudge the paint across that way?
Do you, with your arm?
Yeah. And then maybe it's not thick enough, and it's just not juicy enough. The brush isn't big enough. So that's why actually painting sheets of tissue help, because you can just go plonk a great sheet. So, wow, well, I have done that. I've covered all that now. How does it look?
Right.
Okay. You don't have to commit. You've just laid it down there for a little while, and sometimes just, yep, I'll stick that down now. But it's hard, because you go in there with the intention of, yeah, I'm going to do all this, I'm going to cover that, and then you get involved in the tiny detail again.
Now, there will be people watching this who are big fans of yours, like me, and who think that everything, all these beautiful paintings that you make, just come easily, and, oh, if only I could do that, people think. Do you ever struggle with your work? Do you have times where it's difficult? Do you have days where you're off, or does it generally come fairly easily to you now?
Yes, I have days I'm going to struggle. I haven't been really in the studio properly for about 3-4 weeks now, and I said to Leslie yesterday, oh, I'd just love to be on an Emily Ball course now for 3 days, because she pushes you to the point where you're so in the zone, and then of course you come back from the workshop and life takes over.
Yeah.
And I want to get to that point, but I can't do it by myself. So, you know, I need to be pushed. I also struggled when I changed or developed my style away from the collage to more painting, more abstract work, because I was selling lots of my work throughout the studios, and then I moved to a different style, and of course your fans, your followers come and say, oh, where are the palm trees and the windows and the houses, and you've got to bring those people along with you, but that takes time. So, you know, and it does take a couple of years for people to come with you. I struggle with, people might laugh, but with colour, because I try not to be wham bam with the colour so much, and that's quite hard for me to stay subtle.
Yeah, I am just the same.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about your paintings. Well, one of the things I love is that beautiful colours, and they're just so luscious and.
Thank you. But I suppose when I say I struggle with colour, not letting colour take over.
Right.
Because if you work, you know, when I work in black and white, and the marks and the shapes and the subtleties, I can get there. I tend to lose that a little bit when I start putting the colour in, because you then think, wow, that orange just took over there, that's fine, you know, and it might be the same shape as other things. So it's not letting the colour dominate when I want more mark making in there. So I struggle with that. But I would say just show up, you know, just go to the studio, because sometimes you think, oh, I'm not sure about that piece, and my studio is just at the end of my garden. But if I go in there and sit down or start or look at things, then I'm gone. You know, it's fine. But it's that sometimes that thinking, I don't really want to go in because I know I've got some battle with that one.
Yeah.
So go.
It's almost the thinking about it that's worse than doing it, isn't it? So did you always, this is kind of going backwards now, but I'm just asking you questions as they come into my mind. Did you always know that you wanted to be an artist? Was this something you were aiming for from leaving college?
You know, when you do your careers interview at school, they said, well, you can be a hairdresser or you can go to art college.
Right.
So I went to art college. And then it was a general degree, lots of silkscreen and any other things in the degree as well. So you left not knowing what you're going to do. So I didn't think I was going to be an artist then. I just wanted to be off travelling and see the world. And then when I stopped, it was in New Zealand, and I started doing editorial work for magazines and book covers. So it was always there, you know, the collecting.
Yeah.
But, you know, that have something to fall back on. So in all those years travelling, I went back and did my teacher training. And then, of course, when I came back to the UK, I needed a job, so you end up in full-time teaching. And you always think you need to do that job so you can do your arts, you know. And now when I talk to the kids at school, I say, no, just really, you can be an artist, because look at all the gaming graphics nowadays. You know, there's lots of things they can do.
Do you think that brings me to another thing that I've noticed over the last few years as I got more serious about my painting, is that do you find that the struggles that you have and the strengths that you have in life show up in the studio as well? So can you see a direct correlation between the problems that you have sometimes with making art and the problems that you have in the world, or the way that you are in the world? And I ask that because I'm working with people at the moment sometimes who are struggling to be themselves on the board or on the canvas, but I think it's because possibly they've not allowed themselves to be themselves, or not being allowed to be themselves in actual life for a long time. And there seems to be a correlation between the ability to know who you are and the ability to put that onto a board. Does that make any sense?
It does. I mean, but it takes time for us to know who we are, doesn't it? You know, I suppose you can see in mine the travel, the colours, the kind of in your face, the bold shapes. And I went out the other day, there was a program on Radio 4 about the horizon, the horizontal line, and how people love a painting with a nice horizontal line. So I said to Richard, okay, I'm going out to do a nice landscape with a horizontal line. What did I come back with? All those telegraph poles?
Oh, right. Yeah.
So you can't be what you're not. You have to find what you are and be authentic to you, haven't you? And you know, you can't paint nice flower paintings if that's not what you are. But lots of people try and paint different things without finding themselves what they're really about and what interests them. And you know, you have to be quite brave to say, I actually like structures, or I actually like rusting old ships, and that's what really gets me going, because most of the world don't really.
Yeah.
Whereas people think they have to paint what's popular.
Yeah, and also you think, I think for me, I knew I wanted to paint the landscape where I live. It's quite wild and bleak, and I wanted to paint that and that feeling. But it was only recently that I realised it wasn't the landscape itself. It was the feeling of space and the feeling of power that that landscape has.
Yeah.
It wasn't the landscape. And then because I remembered that when I lived in America, I went to Utah and to the desert areas and had the exact same feeling there. So it's nothing to do with the Yorkshire Dales.
No.
It's to do with this love of space and being alone in a wild place. So that's very different. And so often you might think, I suppose, you want to paint people, you want to paint portraits. You don't understand why you want to paint portraits, perhaps. When you get to find that out, that informs then how you would paint them, I suppose.
Yeah. But that's fantastic when you've found that.
Yeah.
It's almost like you need to regularly keep brainstorming what it is, you know, picking it down and down and down to what it is. Like you said, it's the space and the, you know, the drama of the landscape.
Yeah. I think a lot of times we're not encouraged to really dwell on ourselves, are we? Like,
no.
I don't know if you were, but as a child, you're always told, don't be selfish and don't think of yourself and don't, think about other people, and that's all important when you're a child, of course. Yeah. But you don't ever get told to treasure your own inner thoughts, and I used to get told you live inside your own head too much, you're in a daydream or whatever. You're encouraged to explore that, do you?
Yeah. But also that northern thing, don't be too big for your boots.
Oh yeah, I heard that one lots.
You would never have done these videos or Facebook or all those things where you're actually showing your work, and you have to get over that, don't you? That you're showing off a little bit, as you would say up north. But actually, you have to learn to be a little bit big for your boots. But we're not really inside. Yeah. We're not.
No, and I think that's really important for people to get out of hearing someone talk who's done as well as you have, that even someone who's shown work so successfully and sold and makes a living as a full-time artist doesn't feel inside as if they've got it all figured out.
No, not at all.
Unless you do. What do you think are the rewards of what we do for you?
I think it's that, again, being in the studio, the buzz you get. You go in and you can be there 2-3 hours and you've had the radio on, you haven't heard any of it. You've got snippets. I come in and I say, oh, this was on the radio, but I can't actually remember much about it, because you're so in the zone that it's almost like a meditation, and it's that feeds you as much, and it also keeps you very calm, because you can't think about anything else, you can't worry about anything, because you're totally wondering whether that piece of paper glue.
Yeah.
So it's that is the reward. And when you have a sale, but I mean, at the last art fair, I'd sold 2-3 quite big ones, and there's a lady looking at one of the really big ones, and I thought, yes, if I get that sale, that's really going to make it. So, you're never happy when you sell.
No. I think, if you sell a small one, you think, oh, I wish they bought a bigger one. Or if you, that's the thing. So the reward again. So we said this earlier, but I can't emphasize that enough to people watching who are not as far along, that that is the reward. So when you look at people who are selling their work and think, oh, when I get to that stage, when you get to that stage, you'll want to be at the next stage. You'll wish you were in a better gallery, or when you're in the better gallery, you'll wish you were, in an even better gallery, or there'll always be something else.
Yeah. Remember Nicholas Wilton said about the people who are new and beginning painting, they were at the best stages because they didn't, they were just up there to explore and get on with it, and had none of the concerns we have now.
Yes. And for anyone who doesn't know, Nicholas Wilton teaches a course called Creative Visionary Program that both Karen and I took in different years, and it's available online once a year, I think in February, and I'll be letting everybody know when that gets closer. But yes, he talked about during that's the most exciting time, because you are discovering who you are, and and once you know that, that's like, oh well, I've got that bit over with now. I'm on to another bit. but it really, I saw, it was nothing to do with that, but it was an online conversation with a spiritual person on YouTube. I can't remember what it was. And someone said, I want to get this job and then I'll be happy. And she asked this person to think back to the last time they got something they really wanted and how happy it made them and for how long. And they realized, for about 3 days. And then you readjust your expectations. So you get a big pay rise at work and then you think, right, well, now I make that much money. And then you're happy. You're just at the same level as you always were. Exactly the same with art, I think. Exactly.
I just tell you, another thing that set me along my way was Catherine Roberts, who used to run an art business course.
Oh, right.
She sent us all out to get 10 rejections. So go to the galleries, and your aim is to get 10 rejections. So of course you go out, right, I can do this easy, you know. And then the first gallery I went to was a gallery in Ipswich, a well-known gallery, and walked in there, and he said, "Oh, you should have made an appointment. I don't see people like this." And I said, "Come on, just have a look." And they ended up with a solo show. From us, honestly, you have to. And now I'm setting myself again this autumn time, because that gallery has since closed. So I'm going out there. I'm going to get my 10 rejection, because you're bound to get in that 10. You're bound to get some interest, some conversations, you know. But it's
what a brilliant idea, approaching it as 10 rejections.
Yeah.
Because it's like, right, I want to get turned down.
Yeah, I can do this.
Now, that's a good question, actually, before I go on to my last question. When you approach galleries, as someone who's got experience in that area, how do you approach them? What's your process?
I said that one, I haven't been to galleries for a while. I went to, this was John Russell Gallery in Ipswich, and he'd been going 30 odd years. And as I walked in, I walked up and down outside with my A4 folder with photographs of work, and I walked up and down, I thought, no, you've driven over here, just get in there. And I went in, and he was, like this. And then he said, "Oh, sit down." And I thought, right, I'm in. And then he looked through the folder and said, "Well, of course, I need to see the work in the flesh." I said, "What's in the car?" So then I took 2 or 3 of them in. And then I sent him a little card the next day saying, "Oh, just thank you for seeing me." And he rang me that day and said, "Right, would you like a show?" So that was unbelievable. I then went to the next gallery, and on the same day, I think as he rang and told me I got a show. And I was actually a little bit in shock, and I just walked in and said, "Would you like see my work?" And of course I wasn't engaged, and that one didn't work. But lots of galleries, of course, say don't do that, don't turn up cold,
right?
Email us. I have emailed a few, but of course you don't hear anything. I think more often than not, it's better through conversations and connections, and maybe through social media, and then you can at least say you've been following me. I'm going to try it all again this autumn. Anthony at the John Russell Gallery said if people ring him up, he would always if they ring and ask for appointments, he would always try and see them. So
right.
I think that's the approach I'm going to take, to ring galleries and talk to them, because it's so easy to send an email and just get lost. But if you ring and actually ask for an appointment, what can they say? They might then say, "Can you send us your details?" So, no.
Yeah, but at least it's arriving then not cold, isn't it? Because they've asked for it. So you can say, as per our phone call, rather than
so you've got some way. Because also if you turn up cold, you don't know if you're just going to see somebody who's working there, or the owner. It's a bit, especially if you've trekked across town or down to London or somewhere. It's a hard way to do it.
Yeah.
But then there's all the research and finding the right gallery for you.
I was going to say, how do you do that? Do you just go online, or?
A lot of work online, then a lot of footwork, and then being brave and just doing it. I'm talking myself into it now.
Yeah.
I'll let you know in a couple of months' time.
It is so true, though, that you don't get what you don't ask for. And
no.
I have a business that's not related to art, and when I first started it, I needed to get referrals for clients, and so I phoned up somebody cold who I knew could refer clients. And they said, "Oh, we've been looking for someone to send clients to. Well, this is wonderful. This is exactly what we need." And I was like, "Oh, that was easy." I just like you, I'd sat there for ages,
Yeah.
So, and I think if we can get our heads into the mindset of this isn't a rejection of me, just a rejection of these particular paintings for this particular place.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it is really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing the other art fair at Bristol for the last 2-3 years, and it was interesting this last time because I was surrounded by more commercial artworks than mine, and you could see people working the floor and chatting people up, and I sat back a bit because I thought, you know, with my work, people were either going to really like it and they want something big, and we've seen it before. You know, I can't persuade them if it's not so easy as some other work. And that was quite a lesson to see, because, you know, people will, you can't persuade them if it's not their thing, you know. So sometimes you just got to sit and watch, and the right person will come along. It's the same as the right gallery. If you're not in the right gallery, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
With an art fair, you're in control, but you then have to wait for the right person to come along.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine somebody walking past your work without looking at it, but I'm sure it happens.
They do, because I was just actually, for my newsletter this month, I'm writing about advice for art fairs, and one for visitors to an art fair is, you know, just look us in the eye and smile, because often people scuttle by.
Yeah.
Too big, too bright, can't work out what it is, you know.
Yeah, it's very demoralizing for people to just actually just pass you by.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't even want to engage with that because it's so awful. I just want to go away. It's like, oh.
Well, I also think people are afraid that you're going to start talking to them about it too much, you know, and they just, well, I know myself, I just want to look when I go to an art fair. I don't want somebody asking me if I like it, but that's what we do.
Yeah, I was practicing things at the art trail that we had this weekend. I was practicing ways to just say something to people to let them know I was available without saying anything about my paintings. So like, oh, you braved it in the rain, or something, you know, just something that was well, like, I'm here if you need me, I'm friendly, I'm not scary, but I'm not hovering or trying to sell you on anything. But yeah, it's difficult.
It's funny, you should track somebody around an art fair and you find that all the artists are saying more or less the same thing, like, oh, it's ever so hot in here, isn't it? They go to the next stand, oh, it's ever so hot in here.
Oh, this is great. So we've been going a while, so we should wrap up, and this has been great, Karen, thank you. But if I was to ask you, there's lots of people who are, including me, who are not as far along this path of making and selling art as you are. What advice would you give to us if you had one or even more pieces of advice? What would you say to people who want to do this, want to get joy from it, want to enjoy it? What would you tell them?
Get off the internet, get to your studio, stop looking at your Facebook page. I mean, I don't have any internet access in my studio, so I have to come into the house, make a cup of tea, and I often leave my phone in the house as well. So yeah, no distractions, and just sit at your desk, whether it's a studio. For a long time, I just had a desk in the back bedroom. You know, just go and sit there and start doing something. And then the next time you go in, you've got something there to respond to. It's not like you've still got that blank piece of paper. And then that will lead to something else and lead to something else. Yeah. So show up. No excuses. And don't be so critical, self-critical. You know, do what you love and stand by it. Even when you bring it into the house and somebody goes, oh, what is it? You know, stand by it.
Which they inevitably do.
Yes, and they say, which way up is it? Really. So just showing up and not. I don't spend a lot of time searching, looking at other artists' work either. You know, just find. Yeah, I don't, because you could spend hours, you know, searching and looking at other people's work and saying, oh, I like that bit and I want that bit. Just go and see what comes from you first.
That's excellent advice, because I think I went down that rabbit hole for quite a few years. A couple of years when I first started so I see something in one of your paintings, think that's amazing, I want something like that in mine. And even if I try to do it, it doesn't work because
it's not you.
And I don't like it when I do it. I only like it when you do it. And then it's still, and even if you pull something like that off and you get something that looks okay, you know it's not really you.
No.
So
you can't stand by it then, can you?
Yeah, and even if people like it, deep down, you know, well, you like it, but if you saw the rubbish I do, well, you wouldn't like my stuff. So that's brilliant. Well, this has been really great, Karen. I'm going to put links.
Thank you.
I'll put links to your website and to your sketchbook course on the video when this is posted. And it's just been really fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else has. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and good luck with all this, because it's really great what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.